The image of Marcus Aurelius is a paradox. On one hand, he was the most powerful man on earth, emperor of Rome, commander of vast armies, ruler of millions. On the other, he was a man hunched over parchment in the dim light of dawn, scribbling reminders to himself like a struggling student of the soul. He did not write to impress nor to publish. His meditations were private, whispers to his own conscience, a record of one man wrestling with the weight of mortality, temptation, anger, grief, and duty. And in those whispers, he left behind a map, not of empire, but of character. A map built from principles so enduring that centuries later, we still lean on them. Imagine the life he could have lived if he had believed the illusions that so easily consume men. He could have drowned in luxury, surrounding himself with endless feasts and pleasures. He could have silenced critics with executions, indulged his anger, crushed opponents with ease. He could have lived as many emperors before him had lived, corrupted by power, worshipped as divine, and remembered for tyranny. Yet Marcus Aurelius chose a different path. He chose to rule not only the empire, but himself. This is why his principles matter. They are not abstract theories carved by philosophers who never tasted responsibility. They are not the musings of men free from burden. They are the reflections of a leader who bore unimaginable pressure. Plagues sweeping his people, wars threatening his borders, betrayal lurking in his court, grief consuming his family, and yet insisted daily on living according to reason, virtue, and truth. When Marcus tells us to master the mind, he does so as a man who bore the chaos of an empire. When he tells us to remember death, he does so as a man who buried his own children. When he tells us to love duty more than pleasure, he does so as a man who carried the heaviest duty a human could bear. The first step in approaching Marcus Aurelius is to recognize that his wisdom is not the luxury of the powerful. It is the survival strategy of a man under constant siege. Power does not erase human weakness. Thrones do not protect the mind from despair. Crowds shouting your name do not silence your inner critic. Marcus knew this better than anyone. That is why his meditations are so intimate. He is not teaching the world, he is reminding himself over and over how not to drown in illusion. And in reminding himself, he left principles for us too. 13 principles emerge most clearly from his writings, 13 anchors that he returned to repeatedly, as if testing their strength against the storms of life. They are not meant to be read once and admired. They are meant to be lived, wrestled with, applied. They are not steps to success in the shallow sense. They are foundations for a life unshaken by fortune. They remind us that the only empire worth ruling completely is the empire within. These principles are deceptively simple. They do not dazzle with poetry or complex reasoning. Marcus never wrote to impress. He wrote to endure. That is why his wisdom strikes so sharply. He tells us plainly, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Life is short, remember death. Live in harmony with nature. Put duty above pleasure. Do not waste time in trivialities. Be just, be disciplined, be humble. Accept fate. These are the pillars on which he built himself, not to become admired, but to become free. And perhaps that is the most striking thing about Marcus Aurelius. He did not write with arrogance as a teacher commanding students. He wrote with humility as a student rebuking himself. Again and again, his words reveal his struggles. He chastises himself for anger, reminds himself not to waste time, begs himself to live according to reason. He does not write like a saint, but like a man aware of his flaws and determined to rise above them. In this honesty lies his authority. He never pretends to be perfect. He only insists on striving. This is why his principles are not relics of antiquity, but living truths. They apply not only to emperors, but to anyone who struggles to keep composure at work, to remain patient with family, to resist bitterness and grief, to remain steady when life feels unfair. For though centuries have passed, human nature has not changed. We still lie to ourselves, still waste time, still crave approval, still cling to pleasures, still rage at what we cannot control. Marcus Aurelius faced all of this and left behind a manual for enduring it. As we begin to uncover his 13 principles, keep in mind that they are not commands shouted from above. They are reminders written in the margins of a man's own heart. They are notes to self, whispered in the dark, returned to again and again. If an emperor needed these reminders daily, how much more do we? If the ruler of the world had to remind himself not to waste time, what excuse do we have? If a man who carried the burdens of armies and plagues had to remind himself to master his mind, how much more must we, who live in far smaller storms, cling to these truths? The journey ahead is not about Marcus the Emperor. It is about Marcus the man, struggling as we do, and finding strength in principles that outlasted even Rome. These 13 truths are not locked in history. They are alive, waiting to be lived, not admired. And as we explore them one by one, remember, the goal is not to praise Marcus Aurelius, but to build ourselves as he tried to build himself, steadily, humbly, daily. The first core principle Marcus Aurelius repeats like a mantra is this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In those words lies the essence of Stoicism. The storms of life will rage, wars will break, plagues will spread, people will betray, fortune will twist and turn. None of that lies within your command. But within, in the fortress of thought, there is a throne no one can touch. There you decide what judgments you accept, what meanings you assign, what emotions you cultivate. That throne is yours, if you choose to claim it. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he knew he did not truly rule the weather, or the army's loyalty, or even the beating of his own heart. What he could rule was how he thought about these things, and by ruling thought, he ruled himself. This principle is both freeing and terrifying. It frees you from the illusion that you must bend the world to live well. It terrifies you because it leaves no one else to blame when your mind collapses. To live by this truth is to stop saying, "They made me angry, they made me afraid, they ruined my peace." No, they did what they did. You chose your response, and in that choice lies all your freedom. The modern world resists this. We are taught to externalize. My stress comes from work, my anger from others, my sadness from circumstance. But Marcus insists the root lies within. Circumstances may press, but interpretation decides. You cannot stop the storm, but you can choose not to curse it. You cannot stop insult, but you can choose not to be diminished by it. You cannot stop death, but you can choose not to fear it. The Stoic power is subtle but absolute, mastery of self. And once you taste it, no tyrant, no failure, no misfortune can fully conquer you. The second principle flows directly from the first, the reminder of life's brevity, the practice of memento mori. Marcus wrote again and again that life is short, fragile, passing. He told himself, "Do not act as if you had 1,000 years to live. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." These were not morbid musings. They were calls to urgency. Death was not a distant possibility. It was a present fact. At any moment, the scroll could end. And because of this, every choice mattered. As emperor, Marcus buried many of his own children. He saw death daily in war and plague. For him, mortality was not theory, it was a constant companion. And yet he used this truth not to despair, but to sharpen his days. The awareness of death made him waste less time, cherish loved ones more, resist the distraction of trivial pursuits. If you may die tomorrow, why spend today in gossip? If you may never rise from sleep, why end the day in bitterness? Memento mori is not a shadow, it is a torch. It burns away delay and reveals what is essential. Together, these first two principles form the bedrock of Stoicism, control of mind, and awareness of death. One anchors you in freedom, the other in urgency. One teaches that external chaos cannot enslave you if your thoughts are governed. The other teaches that time is not yours to hoard, but only to use wisely now. Without these, the other principles collapse. For what good is discipline without urgency? What good is duty without freedom of mind? Marcus knew this, which is why he wrote them to himself more than any others. Imagine applying them today. Imagine waking each morning telling yourself, "My thoughts are mine, my choices are mine, and this day may be my last." How much anger would you refuse to carry? How much fear would lose its hold? How much time would you stop wasting? These principles are not ancient dust, they are fire for the present. Marcus Aurelius lit this fire daily, and in its light he endured the burdens of empire with dignity. And in that same light, you can endure your own storms, no matter how great or small. The third principle Marcus Aurelius returned to again and again was this: live in accordance with nature. At first, the phrase seems vague, almost poetic. But for Marcus, it was not abstract. It was a compass for daily life. To live according to nature meant to recognize what you are, to embrace the role assigned to you by reason, and to act in harmony with the greater order of the universe. You are not merely flesh-chasing pleasure, nor a machine of impulses. You are a rational being, endowed with the power to think, to choose, to serve. To deny this is to live against nature itself. When Marcus wrote of nature, he did not mean simply the trees, rivers, and stars, though he saw wisdom in contemplating them. He meant the nature of man, to be part of a whole, to live with reason, to fulfill duty. If a vine grows to bear grapes, and a dog to be loyal, then man grows to be just, disciplined, courageous, wise. To betray this calling by living only for appetite or ego is to wither, to rot, to become less than you are. Do not waste the remainder of your life, Marcus warned himself, in opposing your true nature. The modern mind rebels against this. We are told daily to follow your feelings, to obey your desires, to be whatever you want. But Marcus would say, no, be what you are meant to be, a creature of reason, a servant of truth, a member of humanity. If you live only for impulse, you live against your nature. And to live against nature is to live in torment. The fourth principle follows naturally: put duty above pleasure. Marcus Aurelius sat on the throne of Rome, surrounded by temptations. He could have drowned himself in luxury, silenced his conscience in indulgence, and history would have remembered him no differently than the countless emperors who fell to corruption. But Marcus wrote to himself, "Do what is necessary." Duty is the path. For the Stoics, pleasure was not evil, but it was dangerous. It seduces the soul into believing that life exists to be consumed, not lived. Marcus saw clearly that pleasure cannot guide a man without destroying him. Duty, however, fulfilling your role as a human being, as a leader, as a father, as a citizen, anchors the soul. Pleasure tempts for a moment, duty strengthens for a lifetime. Consider how Marcus lived this. During the Antonine Plague, he could have hidden in safety, retreating into comfort. Instead, he remained in Rome, leading with calm, facing death alongside his people. During wars on the empire's borders, he could have sent generals while remaining in luxury. Instead, he marched with his soldiers, enduring hardship with them. These were not the actions of a man led by pleasure, but of a man led by duty. In our time, this principle is still revolutionary. The world tells us happiness is found in consuming more, resting more, enjoying more, enjoying more. But Marcus asks, what of your duty? What of the responsibility to your family, to your community, to yourself? What of the calling to live as more than a seeker of comfort? Pleasure fades, duty leaves legacy. Pleasure weakens, duty strengthens. Pleasure is about you, duty is about all. And only the latter builds a life worth remembering. Together, these two principles, living according to nature and placing duty above pleasure, form a moral axis. One reminds you who you are, a rational being in harmony with the whole. The other reminds you what you are for, to serve, to contribute, to act justly. They strip away illusion and demand a higher way of living. And though they sound heavy, they are in truth liberating. For the man who lives in harmony with nature and chooses duty over pleasure is no longer tossed by impulse. He is steady, anchored, free. The fifth principle Marcus Aurelius insisted upon was this: we are all part of one universal community. He reminded himself often, what injures the hive injures the bee. What benefits the hive benefits the bee. To Marcus, humanity was not a collection of isolated individuals clawing against each other for gain. It was a single organism, bound together by shared reason and shared fate. To live as though you are separate, to pursue your good at the expense of the whole, is to wound yourself while wounding others. As emperor, Marcus saw this in the most literal sense. Every decision he made rippled across millions of lives. But he also saw it in the smallest sense. Even the least citizen, even the slave, was still part of the human whole. He urged himself never to forget that he was kin with all, that the same divine spark of reason animated both ruler and ruled. To despise another, to cheat another, to use another as an object, these were betrayals, not just of justice, but of nature itself. This principle demands humility. For if we are one community, then pride is foolish. What good is wealth if your neighbor starves? What good is victory if it weakens the whole? What good is pleasure if it corrupts the fabric of humanity? Marcus knew that cruelty, greed, and selfishness are illusions of gain. They destroy the larger body of which we are a part. And when the body suffers, so too does every member. The sixth principle flows from this sense of belonging. Do not waste time on what is trivial, but devote yourself to what matters. Marcus Aurelius berated himself countless times in his journals for drifting into distraction. You are wasting your precious life, he scolded, if you are not pursuing virtue, if you are not serving others, if you are not training your soul. Life is short, he reminded himself. To fill it with gossip, with idle speculation, with empty chatter, is to insult the gift of time. For Marcus, this was not theory, it was urgent practice. He lived under the shadow of death, his empire ravaged by plague and war. He knew tomorrow was not promised, and so he pressed himself to focus relentlessly on the essential. If you are not improving yourself or serving the common good, he told himself, you are wasting your days. He saw clearly that the soul decays not only from vice, but from distraction. A wasted day is a wound no less real than a day of corruption. In our modern age, these principles are more urgent than ever. We are more connected than any generation before us, yet more tempted to believe we are isolated. We drown in distractions, screens, notifications, endless trivialities, while telling ourselves we are busy. Marcus would look at our world and shake his head. So much time wasted on what does not matter, so much selfishness dressed as success, so much neglect of the whole for the sake of the self. To live by his principles is to live differently. It is to remind yourself daily, I am part of the whole. My life is not mine alone. My time is not for waste, but for virtue. It is to measure success not by how much you consume, but by how much you contribute. It is to guard your hours like treasure, refusing to spend them on the trivial, the petty, the vain. And when you do this, life becomes not only shorter, but sharper. Every act, every word, every choice gains weight because it is aligned with the whole, anchored in purpose. The Stoics teach us that no man is an island. To act as though you are separate is to live against truth. And no man has infinite time. To act as though you do is to live against reality. Marcus Aurelius demands we correct both lies. Remember the community, remember the clock. For when you do, life shifts. Selfishness fades into service. Distraction fades into discipline, and suddenly the days, though still fleeting, are filled with meaning. Now some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. The seventh principle Marcus Aurelius lived by was self-sufficiency and inner independence. He reminded himself constantly that the good life depends on the soul, not on fortune. "Look within," he wrote. "Within is the fountain of good, and it will bubble up if you will dig." This is a radical statement, especially from a man surrounded by riches, armies, and endless voices demanding his attention. He knew what many of us still fail to see: if you depend on external things for peace, you will never have peace. Wealth fades, health fails, praise turns to scorn. But the mind, disciplined and trained, can hold serenity in the midst of loss. Self-sufficiency does not mean isolation. It does not mean withdrawing from the world or despising what fortune brings. It means freedom, the ability to remain whole, even when the world fractures around you. For Marcus, this was not luxury, it was survival. How could an emperor endure plague, betrayal, and grief without inner independence? How can you endure daily life with all its unpredictability without the same? To build an inner citadel is to build a refuge nothing can destroy. The eighth principle was justice as the supreme virtue. Again and again, Marcus reminded himself, justice is the source of all other virtues. He saw clearly that courage without justice becomes brutality. Wisdom without justice becomes cunning. Discipline without justice becomes cruelty. Justice, living honestly, respecting others, giving each what is due, was the foundation of all true strength. And he measured his own actions by this standard relentlessly. As emperor, Marcus had absolute power, yet he restrained himself with justice. He did not believe that might made right. He believed that right constrained might. He knew that to act unjustly, even in secret, was to wound his own soul. "The wrongdoer," he wrote, "wrongs himself, he becomes unjust." This is a principle as relevant to an emperor as it is to an ordinary worker, parent, or citizen. Whenever you betray fairness, cheat another, lie, or exploit, you wound not only them, but yourself. Justice is not an external law imposed. It is an inner law inscribed in reason. The ninth principle was serenity in the face of pain and adversity. Life wounded Marcus deeply. He lost children to illness, buried friends, fought endless wars, endured the Antonine Plague that killed millions. Yet he reminded himself, pain is neither unbearable nor unending if you remember its limits and do not exaggerate it in your imagination. Here lies the Stoic medicine for suffering. Do not deny pain, but do not crown it as king. See it as sensation, often temporary, sometimes permanent, but never the master of your soul. Modern life often teaches us to fear pain above all. We see discomfort as failure, adversity as catastrophe. But Marcus teaches the opposite, to accept hardship as natural, to carry it with dignity, to let it refine rather than corrupt. When pain comes, the Stoic does not collapse, nor does he seek endless escape. He acknowledges, endures, and grows. Adversity is the testing ground of virtue, the fire that reveals whether your principles are mere words or living truth. Together, these three principles, self-sufficiency, justice, serenity, form a triad of strength. Self-sufficiency protects you from dependence, justice keeps your power pure, serenity guards you against despair. Imagine living them daily. No fortune could enslave you, for you are self-sufficient. No temptation could corrupt you, for you are just. No hardship could break you, for you are serene. This is not fantasy. It is the life Marcus Aurelius trained himself for, and the life you, too, can begin to shape. The 10th principle Marcus Aurelius lived by was moderation in words and actions. He reminded himself that excess is the enemy of clarity, and that a man's dignity is measured not by how much he says or does, but by how wisely he restrains himself. Let your speech be simple, honest, and measured, he wrote, urging himself to resist the temptation of chatter, boasting, or harshness. For Marcus, moderation was not weakness, it was power under control. In the Senate, in councils, in the presence of soldiers, Marcus had the authority to dominate every conversation. Yet he restrained his tongue, preferring brevity and simplicity. He knew that too many words cloud the truth, and too many actions without purpose scatter the soul. This principle teaches us that silence can be stronger than noise, and restraint more powerful than indulgence. The Stoic is not the one who does nothing, but the one who does only what matters, and does it with clarity. Our age, obsessed with constant expression, resists this. We are told to speak quickly, to post endlessly, to share every thought. But Marcus would ask, is it necessary? Does it serve virtue? Does it build the whole, or only inflate the ego? Moderation is a radical act today. To hold your tongue when insulted, to pause before reacting, to act with purpose instead of impulse. This is the essence of Stoic discipline. The 11th principle follows naturally: resist corruption and maintain integrity. Marcus Aurelius lived in a palace of temptations. Power invites bribery, influence invites compromise, luxury invites decay. Yet he wrote to himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple words, but for a man who could have anything he desired, they were shields against ruin. He knew that corruption does not begin with grand betrayals, but with small concessions. A little dishonesty here, a small indulgence there, a compromise of principle, just this once. Soon the soul is no longer whole. Marcus fought this erosion daily. He insisted on integrity even when no one watched, because the true witness was always his own conscience. For him, corruption was not just political, but personal. To be corrupted by anger, greed, pride, or fear was as deadly as being corrupted by money or power. He reminded himself that every temptation is a test. Will you remain intact, or will you fracture? And he knew that once fractured, the soul is difficult to mend. That is why integrity is not optional, it is survival. In our world, these principles are still urgent. Moderation protects us from the chaos of noise and distraction. Integrity shields us from the slow poison of compromise. Together, they form a code of conduct strong enough to withstand both temptation and pressure. To speak only what is true, to act only with purpose, to resist what corrodes. This is the life Marcus demanded of himself, and the life that preserves dignity in any age. The 12th principle Marcus Aurelius returned to often was humility before truth and criticism. Despite being emperor, he constantly reminded himself, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. For I seek the truth, which has never harmed anyone." These words reveal something rare. A ruler of absolute power, yet willing to be corrected, willing to admit error. In this lies a deep Stoic lesson. Truth is higher than pride. To cling to falsehood because of ego is weakness. To change when truth is revealed is strength. Marcus knew how intoxicating power can be. Flattery swirled around him daily, courtiers eager to agree, senators afraid to contradict. The easy path was to believe them, to imagine himself infallible. But Marcus fought this illusion. He reminded himself, "You are a man, not a god. Do not be deceived by praise." For him, humility was not false modesty, it was the discipline of submitting to reality rather than defending illusion. This principle applies to us just as urgently. In a world where criticism feels like attack, where pride resists correction, Marcus challenges us to welcome truth even when it hurts. To admit error is not weakness, it is progress. The man who cannot be corrected cannot grow. The woman who resists truth, even when it is clear, remains enslaved to ignorance. But the one who embraces truth, even at the cost of ego, becomes stronger each day. The 13th and final principle is to accept fate with dignity, what the Stoics called amor fati, the love of fate. Marcus wrote, "Love only what happens to you and is spun for you by nature. For what could be more fitting?" This is perhaps the hardest of all Stoic teachings, yet also the most liberating. It demands not only resignation to what you cannot change, but gratitude for it. It calls you not merely to endure, but to embrace. For Marcus, this was not abstract. He buried children, endured betrayal, fought endless wars, and suffered illness. Yet he told himself, this too is part of nature. This too belongs to the order of the universe. By accepting fate, he freed himself from bitterness. He could grieve without despair, fight without hatred, suffer without collapse. Fate may wound the body, but it cannot poison the soul that accepts it with love. This principle is the culmination of all the others. Mastery of mind, awareness of death, living according to nature, placing duty above pleasure, remembering community, guarding time, cultivating self-sufficiency, upholding justice, facing pain with serenity, practicing moderation, resisting corruption, embracing truth, all prepare the soul for this final task. For life is not yours to script, it is yours to live. And to love fate is to say, whatever comes, I will meet it with dignity. Imagine the freedom of such a life. You no longer curse misfortune, no longer cling to what withers, no longer rage at what you cannot command. You welcome each event as a thread in the fabric of the whole. Pain sharpens you, joy humbles you, loss deepens you, success tests you. Nothing is wasted, nothing is meaningless, for all belongs to the order of nature. To love fate is to love life as it is, not as you wish it to be. With these final two principles, humility before truth and love of fate, Marcus Aurelius closes the circle. They demand that you see yourself clearly, admit your limits, and embrace reality fully. And though they are the hardest, they are also the most liberating. For the man who can bow to truth and embrace fate is unbreakable. He lives not in resistance, but in harmony. And in that harmony, he discovers peace. And so we arrive at the end of our journey through the 13 principles of Marcus Aurelius. What begins as a man's private notes to himself becomes, across centuries, a guide for anyone who longs to live, not in illusion but in strength. He was an emperor, yes, but more than that, he was a man who wrestled with the same battles we face daily: anger, fear, temptation, distraction, grief. His wisdom survives not because he ruled Rome, but because he ruled himself. Let us remember them clearly, one by one. 1. Master your mind, for it is the only empire you truly command. To break this lie, you must practice indifference to opinion. Remember the brevity of life, memento mori. When criticized, remind yourself, this does not make me worse. Live in accordance with nature and your highest self. Train yourself to care more for the judgment of your conscience than for the judgment of others. Place duty above fleeting pleasure. The Stoics called this living according to nature, to live not for the shifting voices of men, but for the steady guidance of reason. See humanity as one community. What harms the whole harms you. They cannot manipulate one who does not crave their approval. Do not waste time on trivialities, guard your hours. They cannot own one who knows his worth apart from them. Build self-sufficiency and find strength within. Replace it with the harder truth, I am my choices. Uphold justice as the supreme virtue. Face pain and adversity with serenity, but it is also indestructible. Practice moderation in words and actions. Another lie that keeps countless souls in chains is this: this is just who I am. Resist corruption. Keep your integrity whole. It sounds humble at times, even honest, but it is among the most paralyzing illusions you can accept. Remain humble before truth and welcome correction. It is to confuse habit with destiny, weakness with identity, failure with fate. Accept fate with dignity. Amor fati. These are not abstract ideals, but daily disciplines. They are not decorations for philosophy books, but tools for the soul. Marcus Aurelius did not write them to impress posterity, he wrote them to survive the storms of his own life. And if an emperor needed such reminders daily, how much more do we? Notice the balance they create. Some guard your inner life mastery of mind, self-sufficiency, humility. Some guide your outer life, justice, duty, community. Some prepare you for the inevitable mortality, pain, fate. Together, they form a complete philosophy, a shield against despair, a compass through chaos. To live by these principles is not easy. It means rejecting the lies of comfort, pride, distraction, and fear. It means choosing discipline where the world offers indulgence, honesty where the world offers applause, virtue where the world offers shortcuts. It means carrying the weight of truth day after day as Marcus carried it on the throne of Rome. But the reward is freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of passions, freedom from the chains of others' opinions, freedom from the fear of death, freedom from the illusions that enslave. The man or woman who lives this way may not control fortune, but they will always control themselves. And that is the only control that truly matters. Marcus Aurelius's reign ended, as all reigns do. His throne turned to dust, his statues crumbled, his empire eventually fell. But his principles endured, untouched by time, passed like torches through the centuries. For marble breaks, power fades, history shifts, but virtue remains. And in living by virtue, Marcus achieved something greater than empire. He became an example of what it means to be truly human. So let his 13 principles not remain on the page, but take root in you. Let them shape your mornings, sharpen your days, guide your nights. Let them remind you that your life is short, but it can be noble. That your mind is fragile, but it can be free. That fate is harsh, but it can be embraced. And above all, that your worth lies not in what you own, nor in how you are praised, but in how you live in truth. The empire of Rome is gone. The empire of the self remains. Rule it well. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.